Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone. If you've read my column for any period of time, you've probably noticed that I've mentioned periodically Joey Walters, Joey Walters, Joey Walters, the legendary number 17 with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And people often ask me, why do you admire Joey Walters so much? Why do you include him in so many columns? And well, now we're including him in a video, and his jersey is right behind me. Joey Walters, for those of us who are old enough to remember watching him play, which he did for the Roughriders from 1977 to 1982, will always hold a special place in our heart. The Rider teams during the Joey Walters era weren't that good. Not once did he play in a playoff game for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Came close in 1981 when the Riders went 9-7. They lost their final regular season game in a monsoon in BC, and that loss kept a 9-7 Rider team out of the playoffs. But for the most part, those weren't very good Rider teams, and Joey Walters was the one player on many occasions that would make you say, wow. And you could go home from a Rider game disappointed in the result in many cases, but you could always say, well, how about that catch he made? How about that touchdown he scored? How about the things that he did on the football field? And because of that, I think there's an enduring affection for Joey Walters, not only on my behalf, but on the behalf of so many Rider fans who are of my vintage or older, who just really enjoyed watching him play. And it's not just watching him play that resonates all these years later. It's been more than 40 years since he first suited up for the green and white in 1977. It's just the way he treated people. It's just amazing how kind and compassionate and patient he was with the public. And I go back to a personal story from the winter of 1981, and Joey spent the winter in Saskatchewan and played basketball in a local men's league and did all sorts of public appearances on behalf of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And one day I happened to notice that he was supposed to appear at a promotion at the Golden Mile Shopping Center in Regina. So me, then not yet 17, decided to go over there and say hello to Joey Walters. And I was just hoping for a quick hello, a quick autograph perhaps. Well, I ended up talking to Joey Walters for 45 minutes. We stood there in the mall and we talked and we talked and we talked about everything. The time he'd spent with the San Francisco 49ers, the time he'd spent at Clemson University, of course the time he'd spent with the Roughriders. He caught Ron Lancaster's final touchdown pass on October 29th, 1978, Joey's 24th birthday. We talked about that. Joey had played wide receiver for the most part since joining the Roughriders in 1977, but late in the 1980 season, with Ron Lancaster as the head coach, the Riders decided to experiment, moving him inside to an inside receiving position. Back then, that was rather novel in the Canadian Football League. The CFL had just evolved past the stage where every team was using a bulky tight end, and suddenly these two inside receivers, slot backs, were in vogue. And the Edmonton Eskimos had sort of pioneered that, and other teams were emulating the Edmonton Eskimos. And Ron Lancaster took note of that, started using Joey Walters as an inside receiver late in the 1980 season, and it went well. After the 1980 season, Joe Farragelli was named the Saskatchewan Roughriders head coach, and Joe had come from Edmonton, and he'd used Tommy Scott as an inside receiver and just had seen how the slot backs could work in the Canadian Football League. So I remember talking to Joey Walters and asking him, where are you going to play this year? Are you going to be a wide receiver? Are you going to be a slot back? And he says, well, they might flip-flop me a bit, but I think for the most part, I'm going to be an inside receiver. I'm going to be a slot back. Well, what an ingenious decision that turned out to be. In 1981, in 16 regular season games, they play 18 now, Joey caught 91 passes for 1,715 yards and 14 touchdowns. Could have had 18 touchdowns. On 4 occasions, he was stopped at the 1-yard line to set up a Rider touchdown. Just an amazing season. In 16 of those 16 games that he played that year, he had over 100 receiving yards in 11 of them. Just a phenomenal year. To this day, the 1,715 receiving yards is a Roughriders single season record, and nobody's come within 100 yards of it, even though, as I mentioned, the regular season is now 18 games instead of 16. You look at the receivers the Riders have had since Joey Walters played here. Ray Algard, Jeff Fairholm, Don Narcisse, etc. Some Hall of Fame caliber receivers, but nobody's come, Weston Dressler, but nobody's come within 100 yards of the Joey Walters record of 1,715 yards. Just an amazing season. The following year, he had another big year. He caught 102 passes that year, which was then a league single season record, approached 1,700 receiving yards, and made what I still consider to be the greatest catch I've ever seen. It was a one-handed catch in the end zone against the BC Lions in July of 1982, and just a phenomenal catch. And I'm so glad that we have a photo of this great catch taken by the Saskatoon Star Phoenix. And I've found so many ways to incorporate this photo into newspaper articles, into 2 books that I've written about the Roughriders. I look for any reason to run this Joey Walters one-handed catch photo because it's so superlative and it's so representative of the way Joey Walters played during his time with the Roughriders. And back then, people knew where Joey Walters lived. He lived in Whitmore Park in Regina. Kids would knock on his door and ask him for autographs. He would happily oblige. If there was time, he'd go out and throw the football around with the kids. This huge superstar with the Roughriders in the early 1980s was doing all sorts of nice things for the public. And that isn't really surprising when you consider my time spent with Joey back in the winter of 1981 at the Golden Mile Shopping Center. He wasn't here for a long time, just the 6 seasons, 1977 to 1982. But that's a time when you really look back and you just appreciate the things that he did, the kind of spectacular catches that he made, the way that he made time for people. And to this day, that really resonates with me, that really sits with me. And that's why I wanted to take some time today to pay tribute to number 17, Joey Walters, who's, to this day, I'll always consider him the most spectacular receiver in Roughriders history. They've had so many great receivers over the years, but I don't think anybody had a propensity for making the high wire act type catches that Joey Walters made with either one hand or 2. Thanks so much for joining us today. As always, we thank Don Beck and Clubhouse 23 for these surroundings. It's very kind of Don to allow us to use his Roughrider shrine. And yes, that's Don's Joey Walters jersey behind me. If you like these videos, feel free to subscribe to the Leader Post YouTube channel. There's a little bell insignia. If you press on that, you'll be notified as future videos become available. And I don't rule out doing another one on Joey Walters down the road. Thanks so much for your time today, and take care.